Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Jananim saradam devim Ramakrishnam jagadgurum Padapadme tayo shritva Pranamami muhurmuhu Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Namaste and good morning. It's a especially auspicious day because we are celebrating the birthday of Sri Ramakrishna. Yesterday was the birthday of Sri Ramakrishna by the Indian calendar. The English calendar, he was born on February 18th, 1836. But the Indian calendar, of course, lunar calendar, so the dates will not match. Before I talk about Sri Ramakrishna today, this morning, I have a special announcement. Yesterday was a special event where the new edition of the letters of Swami Vivekananda was published in Belur Math in India. It was the new edition was released by most revered President Maharaj Swami Gautamananda Ji Maharaj at Belur Math, which is our main monastery in India. So I'll just tell you a little bit about it. You know, the letters of Swami Vivekananda. Swamiji, of course, is especially favorite to us here because we are here because of Swami Vivekananda. The Vedanta Society of New York was established by Swami Vivekananda. It was the first of the Vedanta societies. In fact, the first Indian ashrama in the West. So this is very historical that way. We were reading, just by the way, the life of Swami Vijnana ji, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, this morning. And we read how Swami Vivekananda ji is telling some of his disciples, many, many years after Sri Ramakrishna passed, after Swami Vivekananda also had passed. He's saying that in America, people revere Vivekananda more than Sri Ramakrishna. And he said, I asked Vivekananda about it once. And Vivekananda said, it is all the play of that mad Brahmin of Dakshineshwar. So all the power that we see manifested in Vivekananda, he said, it's the power of the avatar, it's the power of Sri Ramakrishna. In the letters of Swami Vivekananda, you see Vivekananda up close and personal. The lectures of Vivekananda, the books that he has written, those are like a universal message for everybody. But if you want to know the person, if you want to get close to Vivekananda, you find him in the letters. He used to say that maybe I shall see fit to give up this body, but I shall not cease to work. I shall be a voice without form. So in the lectures of Vivekananda, in the letters of Vivekananda, what we find in the complete works of Vivekananda is Vivekananda, voice without form. And we come close to Vivekananda that way. Romarola, the French writer who wrote a biography of Sri Ramakrishna, of Vivekananda, he says, at this distance of 30 years, so he was reading Vivekananda 30 years after Vivekananda had passed. At this distance of 30 years, when I read these words, like an electric shock enters into my veins, you know. And what it must have been like for people who heard the words of that hero directly from his lips. What effect it must have had. Some of that we find in the letters of Vivekananda. Vivekananda says, whoever reads these letters will imbibe my spirit. So to catch some of the fire of Vivekananda, the letters are important. And we had them. They were all published. But the new edition has many special features. First of all, it's comprehensive. There are 815 letters. Just about every letter that Vivekananda wrote has been published there. Whatever is available to us. Maybe there are some which surely there are some which have not yet come to light. And it's a voluminous work. In fact, in 4 volumes. It's in 4 volumes. what it contains, the special features. So this is what I was told. So they are presented in their original form, meticulously compared and verified word by word directly from the sources stated in the footnotes, from the original letters also. The letters have been arranged chronologically, so which helps you, which is very important for researchers especially, so which helps you to trace Swami Vivekananda's movements. See, it was the style. I mean, letter writing is out of style now, so nobody writes letters anymore. But you would have to write not only the date, but often it was polite to write the place you're writing from. So you can trace Vivekananda where he was on that particular date. From Belur Mutt, he's writing, and it says, Belur on Ganges. Then comprehensive footnotes, charts, and appendices have been included to provide the historical context of the letters. There are some photographs also which are relevant to the contents of the letters. Swamiji's original language and spellings have been retained. So editors, what they had done was they had corrected, changed, but whatever the spellings, whatever Swamiji used at that time, they have been retained. And also, very important, names previously undisclosed or partly disclosed have been restored whenever possible. Errors have been corrected. So if you have read the letters of Vivekananda, you will find that A said this. But now you will find Abhedananda said this. So the whole name. Often in those days it was considered polite to hide the identities, especially if they were living, of the people mentioned in the letters. But now all those names have been given. So you know what's going on or who is saying what and what's being done. So that's there. How do you get the copy? You can go to the website, Advaita Ashram website, and order it online so they can send it to you. And very soon, I think our publishing houses in the United States also will start getting the copies of that. It's worth keeping a set of that at home. And those who like it, some people would say, books? Oh God, real books? So I saw this cartoon. Birthday, a kid is being given a book on a birthday, and the kid is complaining, another book? I already have a book. So those who like them on the electronic format, so it will also be released on Kindle and some other, I think Google Play Store, something like that. So it'll be available online very soon also. All right, but we go back to the source of Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna. Vivekananda used to say that he can create thousands of Vivekanandas out of the dust if he wills. That was his estimate of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, this is what I want to focus on, just a broad outline, a bird's eye view of what Sri Ramakrishna has given us, the teachings. There is a book, another book, Sri Ramakrishna, the Light of the Modern World, written by Swami Bhajananandaji, who is right now a vice president of our order, a wonderful senior monk, very erudite, very saintly. He wrote it more than 10 years ago. The copy I have, he gave it to me personally. It's dated, today I was seeing, 2012, so more than 12 years ago. And there he has written, there's a personal note from him in that book. I feel that Thakur himself has written this book. I'm quoting him. During the whole year it took me to write this book, I felt my mind was possessed by Thakur. And it is that he got this book written through me. He felt that. It's a personal note to me. I'm making it public. I don't know what he'll think, but it's a truly wonderful book. Yes, if you want to know about Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and his life, there is the Great Master written by Swami Sarvapriyananda. These are the original sources. There is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Bengali original Kathamrita, written by M. Master Mahashay. So these are the original sources. But if you want to reflect on Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, what does it mean to us? What are the central ideas there? What are the key teachings there? So there, I think this book becomes very, very useful. So there, I will just take out a certain set of teachings from there, and I will present it before you. If we look at Sri Ramakrishna's life, the one thing that comes out, immediately you're struck with one thing, the reality of God, that God is real. Here is a man who was intoxicated by God. Revered Swami Sarvapriyananda, who was one of the vice presidents of our order, he said Sri Ramakrishna was a glutton for God. So, when you look at Sri Ramakrishna's life and what he said, one thing comes out again and again and again. God, Ishvara, Bhagavan, for him the mother, the divine mother. His life is dominated by that. He says, I swear to you, I tell you in truth, I do not know anything except God. In Bengali, ami mairi bolchi, ami Bhagavan boi ar kichu jani na. It literally means I swear on the name of the mother, of the divine mother. I do not know anything except God. So that God is real. This is very important in our day and age. And for the last 200-300 years, it's been increasingly an age of agnosticism and atheism. That a poet speaks of the sad receding tide of faith. The tide of faith as it's receding from from our shores. The God-shaped hole in the collective human psyche. Nietzsche speaks about the death of God. How can we believe in God in this day and age? I was reading this book, An Introduction to Western Philosophy, by a French philosopher, Luc Ferry. And it seems the book was so successful. It was originally in French, but the book was so successful, it got translated into English, so I got to read it. And it's good that I read it. I've read introductions to Western philosophy by English writers, British or American, but not by a French writer. And the French have their original take on things. And first and foremost, of course, what strikes you is philosophy is French and it's European. The English and Americans have nothing to contribute here. They're not even worth mentioning. If you see the bibliography, all the books mentioned are French or German, one or two Italian maybe, Russian one maybe. No English books, no books written. There have been no writers, authors, philosophers, what the name in England or America or any of the English-speaking world. I mean, he doesn't say so, but he simply coolly ignores all of it. That's one interesting, that's very French. But also, you get a new idea, a new perspective. When I say this, I mean, this is not directly germane to what I'm talking about today, but as an example. Someone might say, tell me, what's new? What did you learn new from that book which you didn't know, find in other English books? One example. We were taught, for example, philosophy means love of wisdom. Philosophia, love of wisdom, literally translates into that. And whenever we studied Western philosophy in India, the professors would tell us, look, we must distinguish Indian philosophy from Western philosophy, because Indian philosophy, the name is darshan. Darshan means to see. Darshan literally means to see the ultimate reality, to see the divine reality. So that's the purpose of philosophy. Whereas Western philosophy is about thinking philosophically about various issues. It is the love of wisdom, the love of critical or analytical thinking. So this is what we were taught. And so there is some difference between the two approaches. But he says no, this author, Luc Ferry, he says no. Philosophy is not the right name for what we are doing. The right name is theory. And he says he derives it etymologically. This theos and orao, exactly, I don't know the literal roots of it. But what is the meaning of theory etymologically? It means to see the divine reality. Literally the same thing as darshan. And he said this was the original meaning of philosophy from the Greek times, from Socratic times, to see reality as it is. And even ultimate reality, even the divine reality, to see it through with the help of our intellect. So like this. Anyway, that's not my point. In that book, he discusses Western thought in 4 periods. Greek thought, the origin of philosophy, then the coming of Christianity, theology, then the modernist period, modernism, and then our present, if you can call it postmodernism. He calls it postmodernism. So four periods of development of thought. And at the end, this is the point I want to make from that book. At the end, he raises this question. If you ask me personally, which one would you prefer to be true? Which one would you prefer? Would you prefer, what is your preference, personal preference? The Greek worldview, the Christian worldview, the Christian in the sense of religious worldview, the modernist worldview or the postmodern worldview? What would you prefer to be true? What's your personal preference? And he said, without hesitation, I would say the Christian worldview, except my problem is one can no longer seriously believe in any of that. After modernism and after postmodernism, one can no longer seriously, if you are an intellectual person, if you are educated, if you are reasonable, you can't seriously accept all these claims of religion. Unfortunate, because that's what I would like it to be true, but it isn't true. See, this is not only just his conclusion, it's the conclusion of the elite jet set in Manhattan today. Anywhere in the great cities of the world, in civilizations across the world, if you are well educated, if you are a thinking person, if you are aware of the issues of the world and of world thought, if you consider yourself rational and scientific, it is cool. It is cool in the American sense to be non-committal about these issues, either be critical about religion or to be non-committal. So spirituality is with a big question mark. And in this context comes Sri Ramakrishna with his tremendous claim and demonstration of the reality of God. And how? Not just in a minimalistic sense, that there is some abstract reality. Albert Einstein was asked, right here in Princeton, do you believe in God? And he wrote back saying that, no, I do not, but I believe in Spinoza's God. The God manifested in the workings of nature. A kind of minimalistic, cleaned up, scientifically purged, sterilized concept of God. Which is true, which is fine. But not the rest of it. Not all those primitive people in ancient times believed none of that. Sri Ramakrishna was maximally religious. Straight away, Kali in Dakshineshwar. What could be more emblematic of Hinduism than that? And he realizes God through that. Swami Vivekananda said, when Hindus at that time were being criticized for idol worship, he said, if idol worship can produce one such as Ramakrishna, worship 1,000 idols, I say. So this was Sri Ramakrishna. Revalidating, rejuvenating something that we have been handed over from the most ancient times, from the prehistoric times. Religion, spirituality, in many forms. It has come and gone in many forms. But it's a central underlying theme of human civilization. Again, a little distraction. Yuval Noah Harari, the book Sapiens. So in that it's a book on history. He makes an interesting observation. We were always told about the beginning of human civilization that it's only when we had agriculture and people started living together that religion, at least in its recognizable forms, because there's some kind of religion even in the cave paintings you see. But once we had an organized life based on agriculture, and the nomadic lifestyle stopped and people started staying together and collected together, there came to be the beginnings of religion or organized religion. That's what's been taught in history throughout. But he says now there's a remarkable discovery. Some part of Turkey, some of the most ancient discovered human settlements, they have found that the first earliest thousands and tens of thousands of years ago, the permanent human settlement, it came about because of religion. It's because wandering tribes gathered together for some lost religious purpose that they had to, because so many people gathered together, you can't feed all of them. Then they took planting crops and harvesting crops seriously and organized, and this farming and settled life and villages came up because they gathered together for some religious function. Religion is not a feature of civilization from the beginnings. Religion is also the source of civilization. It's coming, whatever we have today, it's coming from there. But we were in great danger of losing it Because of our advances in thought, in science, in the society, way we have organizing society, our values, we were leaving all this behind. There's a lot to reform. There's a lot to get rid of. But the problem is throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That's what was happening. And we are suffering because of it. We are suffering. Our modern world is suffering because of it. So here is the antidote in the form of someone who says and shows incandescent in his life, blazing with the reality of God. You can't take your eyes away from him. So this is one, that God is real. Second, it's for everybody. Not just for a mystic, not just for Sri Ramakrishna or Vivekananda or for some mystics in every religion throughout the ages, but for everybody. God is for real, for everybody, present, that the goal of human life is God realization, and it is possible, and possible for everybody. We were reading in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna a couple of days, 2 or 3 days ago. There, Sri Ramakrishna, in an ecstatic mood, he tells the gathered devotees, I tell you, self-realization is possible for everybody. Call on the Lord sincerely from within. Antorik hoy dakle. And it's also very interesting play-off between devotion and knowledge. Because he says, pray sincerely within, which sounds very devotional. But the result, he says, is self-knowledge. Very interesting. You will get, and he says it's possible for everybody. M, who is the recorder of the gospel, is there, and he says, as you say, sir, you must jump in, plunge into it. And Sri Ramakrishna enthusiastically endorses that. He says, he actually says it in English, one of the few English words he knew. He says, yeah. And he laughs. Although in the English translation, it's as if it's translated. It says, yes, that's it exactly. That's what he meant. But I think it's much more beautiful to preserve the original English word. Sri Ramakrishna says, yeah, and he starts laughing. Then he says once again, I tell you, it is all can realize their own inner nature. The Atma Darshan, Atma Gyan. He uses 2 words. Atma Darshan, the vision or the experience of the real self, that I am the Atman. Atma Gyan, the realization, the knowledge of the true self. This is all very Vedantic. But he says the way to do it is through devotion, through prayer to the Divine Mother. Then it's an interesting twist. M again chimes in and comments. He says, that is true, sir. But in his gentle way, but he is twisting Sri Ramakrishna's words. He says, but the Lord is the doer. Ishwari Karta. Lord is the doer. It's by the wish of God that some become enlightened, and by the wish of God, God has kept some in ignorance. Now you see, it is subtly modifying what Sri Ramakrishna said. Sri Ramakrishna said twice that it's possible for everybody. And now what M is saying is, yeah, it's possible, but it requires God's grace, and if the God wills it, some will get it. If God doesn't will it, some will not get it. Sri Ramakrishna this time not only does not endorse this, he comes out and flat out contradicts him immediately. Sri Ramakrishna says, no. If you pray sincerely, the Lord will listen, I tell you. Antarik hoy dakle tini shunben. So he re-emphasizes his point. It's possible for everybody. You only have to want it. You only have to try, and you'll get it. Don't fuzz up the issue with, it's good, the Lord's grace, and if the grace is upon you, you will get it. If the grace is not upon you, you will not get it. Now, that might be true, but our minds are very, they are very clever. So they'll use it as an excuse, this thing. Well, the grace of God is not upon me, so what can I do? Sri Ramakrishna, this God-intoxicated life. What do we learn about God from Sri Ramakrishna? Why this is important is, if you want to learn about God, Atman, Brahman, the ultimate reality, Allah, the Father in heaven, the scriptures are there. You can go and read them. But then they are books, and they are second-hand. Here is a person who is directly speaking from experience. It's interesting that it's also part of the Leela, the divine play, that he did not go very far in formal education. He had some elementary schooling and that's it. So when he's speaking, he's not speaking from books. The German philosopher Schopenhauer would say, do your words come from silence or do they come from more words? So here's Sri Ramakrishna was one whose words came from the depths of this divine silence. He spoke from experience. What did he tell us about God? What is this God? His God was infinite, was capacious. He says, the various descriptions of God we get in the scriptures, not just the Hindu scriptures, in the scriptures of all the religions of the world. It's the same reality, but in various names and forms. He was echoing an ancient truth from the most ancient book of the Hindus. The truth is one, the wise speak of it differently. The truth is one, the sages call it variously, from the Rig Veda. Sri Ramakrishna's modern Bengali rendering of that, Jato mat tato pat. As many faiths, so many paths. They are all true. And later he would validate that through experience, through demonstration. That, see, I have tried this and I see it works. I tried that, I see that works also. For him, that ultimate reality was nirguna, saguna, nirakara, sakara, was with form and without form. At that time, late 19th century, Calcutta, remember it was the capital of the British Empire. And there were various socio-religious political movements in conflict with each other in Calcutta at that time. One of the forces was reform, criticizing the Hindus for their image worship, for their, why do you worship God with form? It's superstitious, it's foolish. And so you should be like us. The Christian missionaries were there, that you worship God without form. Look. And there were Hindu reformers also, who were against they would have Hinduism without the worship of images. The Brahmo Samaj was there in Calcutta, Keshav Chandra Sen and others. So yes, take the Hinduism of the Upanishads, take the Hinduism of the Gita, but not the image worship. Imagine what they thought of Sri Ramakrishna and Kali. So Sri Ramakrishna says, he comes here and he says, Nirakara, the God formless. Sakara, akara means form, with form and without form. God without form and God with form are the same reality. And people would be confused, how can that be so? They don't seem to be. And he says, think of the water of the ocean. There are places in the ocean where due to intense cold, the water freezes into icebergs. And icebergs have various shapes. Water itself does not have a shape. And the icebergs have so many different forms. This is before global warming. It's little less now. But still, they are icebergs. Thank God those examples still work for us. If global warming becomes worse in a generation or two, they'll say, what's an iceberg? That'll be a sad day. So, icebergs have various forms, and Sri Ramakrishna would say, due to the intense devotion, the love of God, of the devotee, the same reality, the same divine reality assumes various forms, and the devotees experience that divinity in those forms. Whether you see water as it is in the ocean or you see an iceberg, it's the same water, although it looks different. And this is such a subtle, use of metaphor, of analogy. For example, I'll tell you one of the issues which may arise. Someone may ask, why do we worship? If God has the form of Kali or Krishna, why only in this religion? Nobody else. People in Arabia, people in Europe, they don't worship God as Krishna or Rama or Kali or Vishnu. So clearly it's something that you guys have made up, imagined. Every civilization seems to have a conception of the ultimate reality, but different conception of the ultimate reality. So clearly it's something that is cultural. It's not real. It's made up by you guys, by the local culture. And Sri Ramakrishna's example is, it answers this. See, he says, because of the intense devotion of the devotee, that means there is a contribution of the devotee's mind there too. There is an ultimate reality, which will be experienced by the devotee. If the devotee is a Vaishnava who loves Krishna, that ultimate reality will appear to the devotee as Krishna. If it's a devout Christian mystic, that ultimate reality will appear to that mystic as the Christ. So the various forms which you find in different religions, there is a cultural input there, but that doesn't mean the whole thing is made up. So there is the ultimate reality appearing through those forms, those names and forms. So this is how Sri Ramakrishna's examples are very sophisticated. If you want to pull out the implications, Swami Vivekananda would say, for each one of his teachings, in Bengali he said, "Judi judi boi lekha jai." You can write basketfuls of books. Baskets full, not basketfuls. Baskets full of books. No, I think basketfuls also works. Anyway. Then not only with form and without form. See, even when you say God is without form in Christianity or Islam, and in Hinduism also, God, Nirakara, is also well accepted. But with form and many qualities. So God is without form and many qualities. God has no form, but God has qualities. God is all loving and all just and benevolent and all knowing and all powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, and so on. But in Hinduism, you go further. It says that there is an ultimate reality where you cannot even ascribe qualities to that ultimate reality. Nirguna. Without form and without any kind of attribute. All those adjectives are still applied by the human mind. It's beyond thought, beyond language. In Sanskrit, avang manasa gochara. And Sri Ramakrishna said, that's also true. That ultimate reality is nirguna and saguna, with attributes and without attributes. And he experienced all this. The Divine Mother, he experienced with form. And his first experience of the Divine Mother Kali was as an ocean of light, as an ocean of consciousness, not with the form of Kali which we are used to, and so on. So Nirguna Saguna. And God comes in human history. For Sri Ramakrishna, God is also Avatara, the incarnation who comes in within us, in human history, in our history, appears as the various incarnations. See, every religion has a conception of a special person. In Hinduism, we have multiple incarnations. There is Rama and Krishna. We regard Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an avatar. His birthday is also coming along soon. Sri Ramakrishna, we regard. And there are many other avatars. Jayadeva sings of 10 avatars, Dashavatara, Gita Govinda. The Bhagavat and others speak of Asankheyam avataram, endless avatars, incarnations of God. God has come time and again in human history and will come. In the Gita, he promises, Krishna says, whenever dharma declines and adharma, immorality increases, is on the ascendance, I appear, embody myself forth for the welfare of the good and for controlling the wicked. I come forth as an incarnation, as an avatara. And in Christianity, it accepts one avatara as Jesus Christ. But there are, in other religions, which do not accept the embodiment of God, but still they have the conception of a special person. In Islam, you have the Prophet, who is not like others, who is elevated above others. Is not an incarnation of God. So it's very interesting. In Islam, the incarnation is the Quran, not the person. So the divine revelation itself is the incarnation. But you have the prophets in ancient Judaism. Or in even more ancient in Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is special. In Buddhism, which does not accept God at all. But you have the Buddha, who is special. In Jainism, you have the Tirthankara, the Jainas. They do not accept God either. But the special person is always there in just about every religion. And Sri Ramakrishna says that the incarnation, so God is with form and without form, with attributes and without attributes. What form? Which form? All forms. All the divine forms which have, not if you make up some stuff. So if I make up Batman, Superman, can you make up God like that? No, you cannot. These forms are the forms in which mystics of that tradition have realized God in ancient times or throughout history. So these are actually forms which are experienced by mystics. Which form? All forms. In male forms, in female forms, in transgender forms, the Ardhanarishwara, Shiva and Shakti together in one body, in non-human forms and formless, in the form of the elements in space and fire and water, and completely formless also. So all of those tremendous variety is accepted. And as the incarnation, avatar also. Sri Ramakrishna would give beautiful examples of what is an incarnation. How is an incarnation special? One of his beautiful examples of the three, first of all, the three friends who were walking, and there was a big, high wall, and they couldn't see what was beyond that wall. And the wall seemed to have no end. They were curious. So with great difficulty, one of them climbed on top of the wall, and he saw what was beyond on that side, and he was delighted. He said, how wonderful! And he jumped over. And these other two were looking at each other. What happened? And the second person climbed up with difficulty, and he saw what was on the other side, and he started dancing. Oh, how wonderful! And he jumped over on the other side. Third person climbed, and he saw there was a mart of delight, a festival going on with great joy on the other side. And he too was about to jump over. Then he thought, what about all those poor people back in the village? Their lives are so sad. They should know about this. Who will tell them if I also jump over? So he turns his back on that and he walks back. Now, this is a very beautiful example. Here it does not clearly mean it's an avatar. It's those great world teachers. It matches very well with the bodhisattva ideal in Buddhism. So the world teachers who come back and teach us, who come back and take us by the hand and take us to the infinite. That is one example. Another example Sri Ramakrishna gives is, again, of a wall. You can't see what's on the other side. But then you come across a hole in the wall. And you look through the hole and you can see the other side. And he says the incarnation is that hole in the wall through which you can see infinity. And Sri Ramakrishna himself, on more than one occasion, he said, he who was Rama, he who was Krishna, he is here in this body, in this day and age, is Ramakrishna. He himself declared to his close disciples. Not just, we have heard of the story of how he said this to Vivekananda, but he said it to many others. And Swami Abhedananda is there on record. His lecture in 1936 was recorded in Bengali, in All India Radio, where he says how many times we have heard Paramahamsa say this, that he who was Rama, he who was Krishna, is in this day and age Ramakrishna. He saw this picture once when this photograph was taken. There's a wonderful anecdote about this photograph. So they wanted to photograph him. And by that time, Vivekananda already had come, Narendranath, the young student, very modern, highly educated and all. And in those days, photography was difficult. It's not like selfie. So they had to take an appointment, get the photographer, because he would not, it would be difficult to persuade him to go to a studio. So the photographer came to Dakshineshwar, the Kali temple, and he was not willing to pose for a photograph. So he was sitting on the stairs of the Radhakrishna temple, which you can see now in Dakshineshwar. And Narendranath, he told the photographer, get ready, and I'll go and talk to him about God. He will go into ecstasy, and then you can quickly take a photograph. But you should be ready, because it takes time to, that camera with the black cloth and everything. So he sat near Sri Ramakrishna and started talking to him. And Ramakrishna went into samadhi. He is in samadhi here. He's completely absorbed in God. He's not aware of the external world. And it seems his head was inclined slightly to one side. And so the photographer, without asking Vivekananda, without asking Narendranath, he came to adjust the face. So he came and touched him under the chin and tried to lift his face. And to his shock, the whole body floated up in air. And he was so shocked, he withdrew immediately. And Narendranath said, Vivekananda, what are you doing? Don't touch him. And then they took the photograph. So that's the photograph. In these ecstatic moments is something that would, like a wave of, like a spiritual wave, a wave of upliftment, of purity, of a sublime presence. You would feel it around him. Many of them also would go into that ecstasy, those who were close to him, physically in proximity. So, of course, another side to the divinity which Sri Ramakrishna talked about was the Divine Mother. This has to be said. Yes, with form, with attribute, without attribute, Shiva, Vishnu, Narayana, but Kali was special to him, the Divine Mother. So for him, beginning, middle, and end, all the paths he walked through, all the experiences, endless experiences which he had, he would always come back and be the child of the Divine Mother, the child of his beloved Kali. He also emphasized the looking upon all women as embodiments of the Divine Mother. And one of the insights we get from him is that Vivekananda and others have said this. Since the advent of Sri Ramakrishna and Ma Sharada, it marks the rise of the woman in human civilization. Now I know that might sound like an incredible claim, because we have seen this huge silent revolution in the last 100 years, how the condition of women has changed across the world. And of course, historians and sociologists will find out historical reasons, economic reasons, sociological reasons. That's true. But that's the way God works, through human history, through human means. I am personally convinced this is extraordinary. In our known history, it has never happened. This worldwide change of half of humanity. Half of humanity. It's a silent revolution across the globe, in every society. And I believe it's a matter of faith. It's the advent of the divinity, and in this avatar, God is worshipped as Mother. And so it leads to the rise of the Mother Shakti across the world. How do we realize God? That's another thing Sri Ramakrishna taught us. Again and again people would come, they would be so attracted by this. So what's the way? Tell us the way. How do we realize God? If God realization is the goal, if I'm supposed to realize God, how? How do I realize God? And Sri Ramakrishna's great, wonderful answer, which is a blessing to humanity. He says, all the religions of the world are paths to realization of God. You only have to be sincere. A number of times in the gospel you find the Vaishnava will realize God. If they are sincere, the Vaishnava will realize God. The Brahmos, who are the reform sect of Hinduism, they will realize God. The Muslim, the Mohammedan will realize God, and the Christian will realize God. All will come to him. Anybody who is sincere in whichever path they walk. Paths are infinite. The paths are as infinite as God himself. Or for Sri Ramakrishna, it was always herself, actually. It's often translated as himself, but he always meant herself. The paths are infinite. Sri Ramakrishna would say that the path is not important, but you have to hold on to one. Moth, path. In Bengali, moth kichu noy, kintu ektake dhore thakte hoy. The various paths are there, and which one you follow is not important, but you have to hold on to one sincerely. Anything, you have to hold on to that sincerely. So all the religions of the world are true, and they take you to God. So what are these religions? They are not just, as we would have it in modern religious studies, sociological phenomena, economic phenomena, political phenomena. All those things are there. There's a political aspect, sociological aspect, economic aspect, psychological aspect to religion. No doubt about it. But essentially, all these religions at their heart are the bridge between the human and the divine. They are paths to God realization. He is quite clear and simple, direct. You might say, yeah, that sounds reasonable. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal, you go, I've been for 1 year, I was at the Harvard Divinity School. That's an institution dedicated to the study of religion. Dedicated to the study of religion. And there are such schools and departments across this country in big universities. And what is religion all about? You will get a dozen different answers. Nobody is very sure. Is it social reform? Is the goal of religion LGBTQ+? Is it climate change? Is it electing your favorite political candidate? What is the purpose of religion? All of this may be true to some extent, but they are not the central purpose of religion. No, they are not. And you will be surprised at how many scholars and professors and with big PhDs and big endless citations and publications, they're not very sure what religion is about. So then you see Sri Ramakrishna's direct answer, and it makes things clear. The central purpose, why do these religions exist at all? They are all pathways to spiritual realization, God realization. Call it self-realization. All of them are true. Jato mat tato path. As many faiths, so many paths. When, within Hinduism, he says, Sri Ramakrishna's own life is a demonstration. What will take you to God realization? You find in his life Dvaita, dualism, Vishishta Dvaita, qualified monism, non-duality, Advaita. You find in his life the Vaishnavism, Shaktaism. He is himself a Shakta. But also the worship of Krishna, ecstatic devotion, loving devotion to Krishna. Throughout the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find probably equally as many references to Krishna as to Kali. So within Hinduism, Tantra, so he had an Advaita Guru, he had a Tantra Guru who was a woman saint. Vaishnavism. So all of these paths, Sri Ramakrishna walked on them and demonstrated. These are, how do you realize God? You realize God through all the religions of the world. You realize God through Dvaita Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. You realize God through Vaishnavism. You realize God through Shaktaism, through Tantra. And, of course, the other religions of the world, as I mentioned. How do you realize God? What's the way? Sri Ramakrishna showed all the yogas. He showed that all the yogas are the ways to realization of God. You can realize God through love of God, bhakti yoga. You can realize God through philosophical inquiry into what is the ultimate reality, who am I? Jnana yoga, Vedanta. You can realize God through meditation. That we see again and again in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna how he goes into ecstasy, into the deepest samadhis, which is the goal of meditation, of yoga, of Raja Yoga. You can even realize God through service. One might say that's Vivekananda, that's not Sri Ramakrishna. No, Vivekananda got that idea from Sri Ramakrishna. Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva, the worship of all sentient beings, knowing them to be Shiva. How do you worship? Through service. So Karma Yoga becomes a way of God realization. How do you realize God? Through the different yogas, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna was asked often, what is the one thing necessary for God realization? And he would say, Vyakulata, intense craving, intense aspiration. You must really, really want God. The heart must cry out for God. And Sri Ramakrishna, one thing about Sri Ramakrishna, all of what I'm saying is literally embodied in his life. There is no gap between his teachings and his life. Swami Vivekananda said, he lived that extraordinary life. I am just reading the meaning of that life. So there's no gap between his life and his message. So Sri Ramakrishna, Vyakulata, intense desire, wanting God, restlessness for God. How did Sri Ramakrishna, we have always read his life story, how did he first experience Kali? How? Through what mantra, through what ritual, through what yogic practice? No, he just wept. He did all spiritual practices as they were taught, but he just wept for Kali. We have heard the stories of how at the end of the day, he would fall flat on the bank of the Ganga, on the sand, and rub his face on the ground till sometimes it bled. And he would say, Mother, one more day has gone. The sun is setting, one more day has gone. And I still haven't had your vision. I still haven't seen you. Are you just an image? Or are you living? You have shown yourself to other great, like Ram Prasad and other great devotees of Kali. Why not to me? Why will you not show yourself to me? Just by sheer aspiration, sheer tears, crying out to God. So what he shows is this Vyakulata, this intense desire for God realization, this intense craving for God. This is the one, what do you call, sufficient and necessary condition. Huh? Necessary and sufficient condition for God realization. In logic, and those who study logic, if, IFF, not IF, IFF, if and only if. If and only if. If you have intense desire for God realization, you will get it. And only if you have intense desire for God realization. Suppose I do not have that intense desire for God realization, and I practice the most sophisticated form of meditation available on the market on YouTube. Will I realize God? No. No. It really doesn't matter what mantra you chant, what ritual you perform, what philosophy, sophisticated philosophy do you follow. Do you follow Shankara or Nagarjuna? Are you an emptiness person or a fullness person? None of that really ultimately matters. But what matters is, Sri Ramakrishna says, Vyakulata, the intense desire for God realization, which he embodied with every atom of his being. He could see that, and he could transmit it to others. You would also feel like it. So Vyakulata. But to this he added the other side, the shadow. He said, how do you realize God? Yes, intense desire for God realization. But he said, renunciation, kam kanchan tag. This also you come across page after page in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The renunciation of lust and greed. That he said. How do you realize God? That is, again, an essential condition. Because that intense desire for God realization will not come if our desire is flowing out into the world. It will never be intense. We might have a mild desire for God realization. That sounds nice. I would also like to be like that. But that's like one, in my to-do list. That's one of the many things. And then that won't work. It must be one-pointed. The only way it will be one-pointed is this lust and greed. He said these are the two things which root us in the world. He would say, for example, pan mach tag, oki tag. You give up non-vegetarian food, and pan is a beetle roll. I know, but how do you explain it? So it's a very Indian affectation. It's if you're a gentleman, and it's like a mouth freshener. So what he means is, you give up this luxury or that luxury, this indulgence or that indulgence. It's not bad. He's not against it. It's a good discipline. But that's not central. One could be vegetarian or non-vegetarian, whichever you are, and can be intensely worldly also. It can be. But what then renunciation of what? What is to be renounced? What does worldliness consist in? Because the world is so vast. How do I renounce all this? He says two things, and they are difficult. Lust and greed. Kama kanchana. He would tell the story of the three friends who were, the three drunkards who were on their way home, and they had to cross the river, and they sit in a boat at night, and they start rowing. In the morning, they find they are exactly where they started. They haven't moved an inch, because they had forgotten to untie the rope. And he says, doing spiritual practices, but not untying the rope. What ties you to this world? Kama kanchana. Lust and greed. So that untying that. Once a senior devotee was sitting in front of him, repeating the mantra with the rosary. Sri Ramakrishna says, they repeat these people, they repeat the mantra so much, and yet nothing happens. Why is that? And he takes the rosary from him, and he says, when I repeat it just once or twice, he goes into samadhi, in God experience. He says, look, I can do it in the left hand. You're not supposed to touch the rosary with the left hand. He said, I'll do it in the left hand, you'll find I'm going into samadhi. Why not? Why not for the rest of us? So he says, you're bound. You're bound there. You're holding on to the world. The problem is this. I want to let go and I want to hold on at the same time. Yes. The Confessions of Saint Augustine, there he says, O Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Not right now. Eventually. But his prayer was answered finally. Yes. So this thing, kam kanchan tyag. Another thing, so he would say that karur bhav nashta karuna. So do not disturb the spiritual attitude of a seeker. That is an important thing. If a person is developing in a particular way, has genuine devotion to God in a particular way, and you think, well, that's for kids. Now I have a much better non-dual model for you. Here, throw that out, take this. Sri Ramakrishna says, never do that. A person is developing according to their own proclivities, according to their own tendencies. Always, if it's something good and high, encourage them. It may not be your path. So this is a beautiful suggestion, that do not harm a person's spiritual progress. just because the person is not following your path. There's the story of how Abhedanandaji, who was here, and Vivekananda, they were young disciples in training at that time in Kashipur, and Sri Ramakrishna was suffering from throat cancer in his last days. And it was Shivaratri. We just had Shivaratri 3 days ago. So at night, they were meditating. Whole night they were awake, the young disciples. They were meditating downstairs. Sri Ramakrishna was upstairs in his sick room up there. And Vivekananda, he had seen Sri Ramakrishna transmitting spiritually, literally. Vivekananda would later say that I know that spirituality can be given, just as you would give a flower to another person. It can actually be given to another person. We know spirituality through books and talks and meditation camps, and that's all right. That's for all of us. But there are people, extraordinarily powerful people, who can change a person, make a person spiritual, actually. So it could be given. Now Vivekananda wanted to see that after so much spiritual practice, have I developed that power, what Sri Ramakrishna had? So he told Abhedananda, Kali, he told Abhedananda, sit next to me. And when I'm meditating, when you find I'm deeply absorbed, touch my thigh. So another person who saw this, they both were sitting and meditating in the room downstairs, and Vivekananda was in Samadhi, the young Narendranath. And Kali was sitting next to him, Abhedananda, who later became Abhedananda. And he was touching Vivekananda's thigh, and his whole body, his arm was shaking as if there was a powerful electric current flowing through it. And then he withdrew his hand. Vivekananda asked him, did you feel anything? He said, yes, it was like a electric shock flowing through my body. And that was it. One of the other disciples, I think it was Budogopal Maharaj, Advaitananda probably, came downstairs and he said, Sri Ramakrishna is calling you upstairs. Vivekananda. Sri Ramakrishna was sick upstairs. He didn't know what was going on here. He's calling you. Vivekananda went upstairs. Sri Ramakrishna says, shame. You are spending without accumulating. He says, you are spending things without jama karar agei kharoch. You're spending without accumulating. And you have harmed that boy. He was developing nicely in his own way, and now it is all spoilt. He says it's like aborting a child. He says it's spoilt. Luckily, he says the boy is fortunate, he will not come to any harm. He is lucky, but never do that again. But it affected Abhedananda for the rest of his life. And if you study his life, so right afterwards, he became an ardent and uncompromising non-dualist. He lost faith in, the worship of God with forms and devotion, dualism. It was only non-dualism of the highest kind. Somebody reported it to Sri Ramakrishna that Kali has lost faith in God. He doesn't believe in God anymore. And Sri Ramakrishna calls him and he says, is it true that you don't believe in God anymore? And he said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't believe without knowing it to be true for myself. And Sri Ramakrishna says, but I tell you so. He says, no, I can't accept it that way. Sri Ramakrishna said, if you said this to any other guru, he would have slapped you. And Kali says, you can slap me if you want, sir, but I won't believe it. And then Sri Ramakrishna said, eventually you will believe, you will accept all of it. Don't be one-sided. Let me tell you, my boy, don't be one-sided. So that was another teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. He says, I like playing all the notes on the scale. It's difficult to stay in the knee. The sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa. So it's very difficult to stay on the high note. I like playing all notes on the flute. I don't want to be monotonous. What he meant is one note only. Dualism or non-dualism. The knee, he meant the highest non-dualism. That all is Brahman. I have realized the top. The rest is no good. No, not the rest is no good. Yes, the high point of the Everest is the highest point in the world. But down in the valleys of the Himalayas, there are beautiful gardens and beautiful places. It's not that they are false or wrong. So, he said, don't be one-sided, my boy. He didn't like people who were one-sided. In Bengali, he would say, I roshe boshe thakte chai. I want to enjoy God in all flavors. And he wanted his disciples to be like that also. He didn't want them to be one-sided. Human beings, he saw them as the abode of the divine. Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva. He said, know that God is appearing to you in the human form. Vivekananda would later put this more directly. He said, never approach anything except as God. Vedanta, the highest Vedanta made practical in our day-to-day life. As we move around in the world, we interact with people, we go to places, we handle objects. Never approach anything except as God. What a tremendous practice that is. In that one little formula is non-dual Vedanta and how to live it in day-to-day life. Sri Ramakrishna showed that. His view of the human was this divinity embodied in the human form. And he was tremendously practical. There's another thing you see about Sri Ramakrishna. Practical, highest philosophy, but practical and humorous. So, for example, if you have God in all these human forms, but these human forms, some are good, some are bad, some are evil. How do you deal with that? People say that it's wonderful to think all are God, but people are not nice. There are people who are troublesome, who will harm us. How do you deal with that? Sri Ramakrishna had very practical advice. He said, the tiger Narayan. God is in all beings, Narayana, Vishnu, the Lord is in all beings. Into the tiger also. But that doesn't mean you will embrace the tiger Narayana. What will happen? The tiger Narayana will embrace you. And that's it. What he meant by the tiger Narayana is the Lord is playing in so many different ways. Not all are helpful for you. You must learn the skill of navigating your way through life. Whether you want a worldly life, you want a family, you want success in this world, and that's all you want, even then you must learn the art of living in this world. Otherwise you'll get hurt. And if you want to be spiritual, that's also, you have a goal, you have a purpose, God realization. So you must protect yourself. You must not let all are God, and then you're swept away. And the gambler takes you to a gambling den. I want to see God there. You can't. Not so easy. So there one must be careful. The example of the elephant Narayana. So the disciple learned from his guru that all is God. And he loved it. He said, that's great. Now he went out into the village, maybe to beg for alms or whatever. And in the village pathways, people were running away, shouting, the mad elephant is coming, run away. And he thought, well, the elephant is also God, so I won't come to harm. It'll be all right. God is coming in the form of the mad elephant. And then he saw the elephant charging down the narrow path. And the Mahut, the person who controls the elephant normally, he's sitting on the top, but he's helpless. He can't control the elephant. And he's shouting, get out of the way. I can't control the elephant. Get out of the way. And he thought, well, no, but God is in the form of the elephant. Nothing will happen to me. The elephant came. I think the elephant couldn't believe its beady little eyes. And he caught hold of this fellow and tossed him to the side of the road where he lost consciousness. And when the disciples brought him back to the ashram, the guru asked him, and he told the whole story and said, well, sir, why did this happen to me? You said everything is God. And the guru said, well, the Mahut is also God. Why didn't you listen to the Mahut God? Common sense. Always protect yourself. Especially when you have a high goal. Sri Ramakrishna would be very careful. Himself, practically. If you found any very worldly person, he would carefully avoid such a person. And he could see into people's minds. People who would gather around him. Some came out of curiosity. And he found if they were not genuinely spiritual, say, have you seen the temple? Have you seen the gardens? Go near the river. Take a look. Take a walk around. That's the Indian equivalent of the American, go for a hike, take a hike. Spiritual experience, I'll end with that. For Sri Ramakrishna, spirituality was experience, above all, anubhava. Not reading about it, not philosophizing about it, not even just believing, not even just practicing this or that, actual experience which will convince you. Vedanta also says, knowledge acquired from the book will not cut down an illusion which is lived. Vedanta says this world is an illusion, you are Brahman, the world is an appearance in one consciousness, you are that consciousness. But it's all something we are reading. We may even go through the arguments and understand the arguments. Still won't work. Because we feel, I have a living experience of this world. And the arguments and what I read and what you taught me is an intellectual matter. And somehow they are not at the same level. It's only a lived knowledge which can cut down a lived error. So Sri Ramakrishna would always emphasize experience, the experience of God. He would say, you can actually experience God. See, that's why Sri Ramakrishna is for this age. It's predominantly an empirical age. It's not that we are against spirituality. It's not that we are against religion. But we want experience. We want it to be real for us. Not just being told about it. Not just believing in something. Not just assenting to a doctrine. So Sri Ramakrishna this is the first thing that he would tell people. God can actually be seen in straightforward language like that. That's what turned Narendranath into Vivekananda. He went around asking people in Calcutta in that day and age, have you seen God? So there were many religious teachers who taught different doctrines and different religions. Have you seen God? And they would all stutter and hum and haw until someone directed into Sri Ramakrishna. He said, go and meet that. He has an answer for you. He asked Sri Ramakrishna and for the first time got a straight answer. Yes, I have seen God. Just as I see you, even more clearly. That made Narendranath into Vivekananda. And here he would come to this country and also say the same thing. That religion is a matter of realization. If God exists, we should be able to see God. If I have an immortal soul, I should be able to feel it. Not just believe in it, not just understand it. I should be able to experience it and live it in my day-to-day life. So, Anubhava. And Sri Ramakrishna, if you see his life, if you see the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the day-to-day discussions of Sri Ramakrishna, again and again what you see is God experience. He's constantly experiencing the divine, like a laboratory in front of the public. And it is tremendously convincing for people. People would come with disbelief, with skepticism. People would come to scoff and return convinced or at least tremendously shaken. So, God experience. Sri Ramakrishna said, the goal is to realize the absolute and then come back into this world and see the divine in all beings and live with bhakti and bhakto. Bhakti, bhakto, bhagavan. Live with the love of God, with the lovers of God, and with God. With God and the lovers of God, and with the love of God. And he'd say, Eta pakamot. This is my final conclusion, my mature opinion, he says. Pakamot in Bengali, my mature opinion. So the way he described it in this book, I'm quoting all of this from this book, Swami Bhajananandaji's Sri Ramakrishna, the Light of the Modern World. He draws a curve like this, like a bell curve. It goes up like this and then comes down like this. On this side is dualistic religion. I am there, God is there, I am the child, God is the mother, Mother Kali, and I want to experience her, I want to get the vision. But still, there's difference. I'm certainly the seeker of God, and that is the sought. I am the human, and that is the divine. There's a difference. Dualistic religion, whether in devotion or meditation, and then you come to that realization where there's only one reality without a second, the non-dualistic Vedanta. And then the curve continues down again. There's nothing higher than that. But higher is not the end. Then you come down on the other side of the hill, which Sri Ramakrishna would call Vijnana. So from dualistic religion, you attain the jnana, the knowledge of the highest, and then Vijnana. Vijnana means a special realization or a complete realization, where you come back to this world again. And you experience the divine in everything. So what is God and what is this world according to Sri Ramakrishna? He would use two words, Nitto Lila. Nitto means the absolute. Literally it means the eternal. There is a divine reality, an eternal reality. And you realize that through spirituality, through religion, through mystical practices, all of these paths, through meditation, through philosophical inquiry, through devotion. And then after that, you find that which we left behind and we went to that eternal, to that absolute. That which we had left behind, that's also that same absolute. But now appearing as human beings, as this world, as this body, and this life. So, this is called Vijnana. Once you come back into this world, it's not that, oh, that was real, I'm again back to this awful reality. No. This is the same divine reality in this form. Now what was samsara earlier, world earlier, becomes Leela, the divine play. It's difficult for us to call this Leela. This is our life. Calling it Leela, divine play, doesn't do much. But for him, for the enlightened one, it becomes Leela, divinity. See, Sri Ramakrishna's view of spirituality was always overwhelmingly positive. What I mean by that? Sin, suffering, religion with a scowl and a long face. Sri Ramakrishna was just the opposite. He said, in Bengali, his language was often very blunt and coarse and rural. He would say, the rascal who always thinks of sin becomes a sinner. Who keeps on thinking, oh, I'm a sinner, will become a sinner. Je shala pap kare, she papi hai. In Bengali, he would say. He would say, have this attitude. I think of God. My mind dwells on God. God is in my heart. Who, me, a sinner? How can I be a sinner? What sin is there for me? Take the name of God and all sin goes away. One of the devotees who had led a rather fast life came and said, regretted it and said, I have all these sins in my life. I have a mountain of sins. What can I do? Sri Ramakrishna said, oh, but that's a mountain of cotton. Light one little flame, it will burn up in a trice. One of the devotees said, if I had known that there is this like tremendous divine vacuum cleaner, I'm using the word vacuum cleaner, this place where you can wash yourself clean, I would have committed a few more sins, It'll burn up, it'll all go, you'll be relieved of all the burden. This huge burden, you think it's a mountain, it gets burnt up in a trice. But the fire is the fire of knowledge, of self-realization, God-realization, whatever you call it. The divine presence will immediately wash away all sins. Do not think of yourselves as sinners, he said. Again, suffering, sorrow. Yes, in Indian religion especially, you will see the beginning is human struggle and suffering and how to overcome suffering. The Buddha starts with that. In fact, all the ancient philosophies, if you see, what is spirituality? What's this project of spirituality? What's the point of it? What do we get out of it? You see, the beginning point is suffering. The Buddha says this all is suffering. Is there a solution to suffering? And he discovers a solution to suffering. The same is true in Jainism. Same is true in Hinduism also. Sankhya. The Sankhya Karika, the first verse starts with, afflicted with the three kinds of suffering, the human beings, all sentient beings seek to overcome suffering. Worldly means, I'm translating. Now, this is at least an 1800-year-old, 2000-year-old text. All worldly means being inadequate. Hence the search for a spiritual solution. And then begins the spiritual quest. But always suffering. In Nyaya, in Vaisheshika, in Sankhya, in Yoga. You find the quest is, the world life is suffering. How do we find relief from suffering? How do we escape this cycle of suffering? The historian Will Durant, he said about India, he says, when the monsoons fail, India starves and dreams of nirvana. So from suffering comes in ancient times, suffering comes the quest for realization. But Sri Ramakrishna was not like that. See, even older than all these philosophies, whether it's Buddhism, Jainism, whether it's Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, older than all of them are the Vedas, are the Upanishads. And there, suffering is secondary. Ananda, bliss, joy. The quest is for fulfillment. Quest is for infinitude. The quest is for limitlessness. The quest is for, so the clock is sliding down, showing its time. It's had enough. And Sri Ramakrishna was like that. If you told him life is suffering, he'd say, yes, but life, I see that life is a Majar Kuti, that means a market of mirth, of joy. It doesn't seem like that to us. It seems like a vale of tears and suffering. Yes, that might be the beginning of our quest. But remember, the end is not just suffering is gone, I'm like a peaceful, blank state. It's like anesthesia. No. It's a full living spirituality. It's a joyous life, here and hereafter. So this search for complete, limitless fulfillment, ananda, bliss. This you find before all these philosophies, before the age of darshana. In the Vedas you find a world view which is blissful. The world as it were is soaked in bliss. And Sri Ramakrishna was a teacher, a master, a guru of bliss, of joy. How to transmute our life, present life, into a blissful life, ananda. I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Ma Sharada, Swami Vivekananda, to shower us with their blessings. May knowledge and devotion and dispassion for the world, this spiritual seeking and ananda come into our lives in this very life itself by their grace. Sri Ramakrishna had this incredible power. Somebody asked, what is the special spiritual power of Sri Ramakrishna? He had this incredible power of molding people's minds like clay, changing the ordinary into the spiritual. So that power is still there, still working. May that power work on us and transmute us from just human to the divine, to the saintly. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Parnamastu.